Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. After surviving a near-death experience at the age of 40 caused by a severe inflammatory disease, he has fully recovered, largely through the use of a wide variety of natural health modalities, including meditation. This experience led him to found Unyte in 2017 to fulfill his passion for improving health and wellness. Unyte's mission is to guide people to happiness and health through effective natural health solutions. Unyte's first offering is an interactive meditation product that makes meditation easy to learn, engaging, and effective so that anyone can realize the proven health benefits it provides. Prior to founding Unyte, he was EVP, Customer Experience and Chief Digital Officer at Rogers Communications, a $30 billion Canadian telco and media company, and CEO of PointRoll, a Fortune 500 company which under his leadership grew to 450 employees and 120 million in revenue. Welcome to the show, Jason Tafler.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Matt.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, man. It's been a while. I've looked at your work and what you're doing over at Unyte, and I'd like reading the bio because we got a big wig from the corporate world, and we've got you over on the mindfulness side. So it's like recruiting, like LeBron James to the lights. It's good to have you over here.
Well, it's good to be here. It's a lot more fun on this side.
Oh, good, man. Well, you have a really interesting story. I came across your work because I needed to get some of that sandwich money, and I have a crowdfunding. I know how to do those. So I was looking at really cool projects that I wanted to help and just support. And then I see Unyte, and I reach out to you, and you respond. And I was like, oh, you're in Toronto. This thing is really cool. Like, what's going on over here? So do you want to share a little bit about your personal story and how you got into this, and then what Unyte does and all the great stuff you're working on?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks again for having me. So basically, I was one of those guys who was pretty intense growing up, always kind of focused on, competition, achievement, the next thing, planning for the future, played a lot of competitive sports, was competitive in school. And since I was a teenager, I was really always interested in health, working out, sports, food, supplements. Read everything on neuroscience and the brain and mind body back then, 25 years ago. And, if I hadn't kind of gotten so focused on kind of the financial world and trying to make money and with that achievement, that external achievement and validation, I would have definitely done something in kind of the neuroscience realm, mind body realm. But I got caught up in that world, and long story short, I worked really hard, like a lot of people, from the age of just after 20 to 40, probably worked 80 to 100 hours a week, and just kind of had all types of interesting experiences, as you mentioned, that we don't have to get into, but learned a ton, made a lot of mistakes, had a bunch of successes in business. And just after the age of 40, I just had my 40th birthday. I was feeling a bit burnt out, to be honest, and I thought I was generally healthy, and all my friends and colleagues would have said, hey, yeah, Jason, he's a healthy guy. He knows a lot about food and alternative modalities, and he's on a lot of supplements, and he drinks a lot of white tea every day, and he kind of gives us ideas. But what I didn't realize was that I was stressed out of my mind. I was anxious. Even though I thought I was aware, I was completely unaware. I was the opposite of what I would say mindful in terms of the stress and its effect on my body. And I was probably spending 80% of my time in the future or the past versus the present. And I had a big wake-up call. And I'm not sure if any of your listeners out there I'm sure some have had some pretty rough health experiences. I was at work one day on a Friday, and sitting there in a meeting, and I started feeling sick, and I started turning yellow. And I was like, and the person across from me said, hey, you're turning yellow. You don't look very good. I'm like, I don't feel very good. And I started having internal bleeding, like rapidly out of the blue. And so I'm sitting there in an office, and I end up making my way to the ER room at a hospital in Toronto, Mount Sinai. And I basically almost fainted as I got into the ER, and they started, I was losing profuse amounts of blood, and I almost bled to death. I mean, I was bleeding for about 36 hours. I lost over half my blood volume. hemoglobin dropped from 140 to like the 60s. They had no idea what was going on. They start pumping blood transfusions into me. I had 4 blood transfusions pretty quickly. And that was just kind of keeping the blood levels at the halfway mark. And at one point I'm laying there, and my wife was there, my brother was there. I have a 9-year-old son, Aiden, who was 7 at the time. And at the time I was literally laying there thinking, I may not make it out of here alive. And I was kind of trying to come to terms with that. I also had lost my father suddenly 15 years ago from a heart thing out of the blue. So I was kind of, wondering, is history repeating itself here? And so it was a real kind of shock. What I tried to do in the hospital, I just tried to breathe, and I tried to kind of get to some level of, control over my, heart rate and blood pressure, which wasn't looking too good. But then I realized what really hit me, number one, I might not make it home to see my son again. Number two, you really you really can't control, everything. You think you control things. I lived my life trying to control. I had to let go at that point. I knew that I could not control the outcome, and it was out of my hands. Here I am bleeding out. There's nothing I can do about it. The doctors can't figure it out. There's nothing they can do about it. So if it happens, I kind of came to terms with, if this is it, then it's been one hell of a journey. I felt like I hadn't lived as long as I had hoped. And I felt like I hadn't really pursued my passions, which were always more around the health space and helping people. I had kind of got caught up in this whole other world, even though I knew what I really wanted to do. And the voice was getting louder over the years and decades. So I vowed that if I were to get out of there, I was going to transform and just, focus on what I was passionate about. So the bleeding luckily stopped after 36 hours. And then they went in there, they diagnosed me with an inflammatory bowel disease called Crohn's. And then I was in there for about a week, and I just decided in the hospital, I said, I'm done. I'm quitting my corporate job. I'm done with all that stuff. I basically had a vision in the hospital of these concentric circles where I'd live my life with work in the middle and second and third and fourth. And I said, I'm flipping it upside down and putting myself and my soul in the middle, my family around there, and then everything else I do needs to be tied to my purpose and what I'm passionate about. And that's what I'm going to do. If I'm here for another week or another year or another decade or longer, that's what I'm going to do. And so it was a rebirth. It was a rebirth. I started from scratch. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. Oh, dude. Well, it reminds me, I have a good friend, Johnny Ronca, who shout out Love on Revolution, he had a near-death experience too. And that's how he started his company. So it's funny how, sometimes we can let it go so far, right? You're in the mindfulness and you're in this game and you're doing something. And you're like, this is the thing. Yes, I'm winning. And then it's just like, get this hard stop because, this world needs you to do what you do. It's on this side. And ultimately you feel more fulfilled. Right. That's what it really comes down to. You change your world, and if you look back at that version of you, maybe that wasn't, as aligned as you might have thought. So do you want to maybe just recap? Because I wrote a few things down, but what were those big realizations as you are processing your death? Because I've had 2 near-death experiences and that I can remember. It could be more. But that's why I think a shamanic death ritual is so powerful, because you think you have all this time, right? So what were some of the key takeaways for you that when you process that you're like, I need to readjust some things, and maybe some of the things that you were tricking yourself, you were saying to yourself later or whatever, if you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
it's a great question. So there are a few things. One, I knew I had heard this internal voice, whatever, call the soul or your purpose, or your authentic self for decades. I knew as a teenager what I really was passionate about, but I kind of got sidetracked by the world and by, my attachments and desires, I guess. And growing up in child, I think a lot of what we do in life, at least based on all the reading I've done, I could be wrong, but is based on, our beliefs and our limiting beliefs, which create our thoughts and emotions and our reality. And I had a lot of limiting beliefs, and I've since then worked through over 80 of those. Not that the numbers matter, but just every time I'm thinking something or feeling something that isn't aligned, I kind of go, what belief is that? What am I believing? Like my value is tied to how much money I make, or my value is tied to, what other people think of me, or what society thinks of me, or how much I do, versus who I am. And so there was a lot of kind of revelation around, just beliefs in general, and that I had been hearing this voice, and this kind of calling for a long time, but I always had an excuse. It was always the ego or the, ego mind saying, hey, just another few years, you'll have more experience, or you'll have more money saved up, or, the world will be ready, or you'll be this, or you'll be that, or you'll know this, or you'll know that, or you'll read more books, or you'll meet more people. There was always something that was kind of holding me back, so to speak. It was never perfect. And I think what I realized is, all you have is the present. And, if you listen to yourself and you use the gifts you're given, then it's a journey, and you just got to try and keep going and try one thing at a time and see where it takes you. So that was a big one for me. The other one was, I thought that I was aware, but I really wasn't very aware, of my kind of thoughts or emotions or physical sensations in my body. I'm sure I had a lot of stomach issues over time, and I just kind of blocked it out, because that was kind of the tough thing to do. I'll just block it out. I can just keep working. I was a workaholic. I was addicted to work. I worked day and night. I had a lot of capacity, and I pushed my body, I'd say, to the limit in that way, not in a sports, or physical type way, but in a sort of work type way. So I feel like, I wasn't really aware of the impact that the stress was having on me. And because I wasn't following my purpose or aligned with that true self, I had a lot of internal kind of anger that I would hold in, and I wouldn't really let it out. I would be aggressive at times, but I held a lot of it in. So I personally believe my body, slapped me in the face and said, this is a wake-up call. Whether you call it your true self, your soul, it was a wake-up call. Because I don't think I would have stopped on that path I was on unless I had a serious wake-up call, or potentially even, died, to be honest.
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny because we get these subtle signs, over time. And I think that we just want to ignore them,
Yes.
And then sometimes we need a nice big, thing. And thankfully you got the idea, because some people get to wake up and then they don't act on it, because
Yes.
it can be challenging. It's frightening. It's totally different than what you're used to, so you can have compassion of those things, but, ultimately listening to yourself, because when you are faced with a near-death experience, you realize that you can literally die whenever. But sometimes we forget that. We just motor around. And
Yeah.
then if you are faced with that, you have to look and be like, what the heck have I been doing? What was most important? What wasn't most important? So I think that's awesome. Ideally, you could have got there with a gentler reminder, so that maybe wasn't so awesome for you, but definitely glad we recruited you on this side. So let's talk about Unyte and what inspired you to. So once you have the near-death experience, you're like, okay, I'm making a shift. And then did you have the idea for Unyte overnight, or was it a process in like a direction you started to move towards?
No, it was a process. I mean, to be honest, I had kind of tried mindfulness and meditation many times over the years, and always had a very overactive mind, and was kind of going 24/7 and thinking of the future all the time. So I had trouble, even trying to quiet it for one breath, to be honest. And I would just kind of then say, okay, I'm done with this for now. I'm going back to doing what I'm doing. Right. And so I was in the hospital, my brother, who had been kind of more aware over the years. And, he kind of gave me a book by Ram Dass, and Be Here Now. I started reading that. Then someone else recommended, some audio meditations and some Tibetan monk chants, the Gyoto monks of Tibet, who are quite amazing. And my old self would have been like, who are these monks chanting in my ears? But, if you're I'm laying there in the hospital, I had this experience. I'm like, I just opened up and said, now's the time. If it's not going to be now, I'm not sure when it's going to be in this lifetime. So I started listening to the monks chanting and felt peaceful, and reading and listening to certain meditations. And it just kind of started to click, to be honest. I felt this when I had been bleeding, I had felt a bit of an inner peace, to be honest with you, while I was breathing. And it just kind of was kind of a quiet inner peace. And I wasn't sure how it would all play out. But so in the hospital, I started meditating and felt this kind of inner calm and a little more clarity of mind and thought than I had felt in a long time. And just had some of these epiphanies as I was going through it. So it really hit me, wow, there's so much more to, the mind, body, soul connection than one might think, especially when you're busy kind of in the, world that I was in, the business world. And this is really powerful stuff. And there's a reason why now when you read Tim Ferriss and everyone else, most top athletes and CEOs use mindfulness or meditation. It's their number one habit they do in the morning. And I get that now. And the science is there with thousands of articles. But for me, it was very personal in that hospital, in that moment, I just felt like I connected to my true self. And I felt some quietness and calmness come over my mind and body. And I felt more clarity. And I was able to start kind of writing out, if you're reborn, in this life and you have a new chance, and, why am I here? What is my purpose? What are the gifts that I have or have been given? How can I use those to help people? And I started writing out a purpose. And so it just helped me kind of connect and start to write and start to feel and think a little bit differently. And so I had an idea for over a decade, even when I was in the corporate world, about Unyte, which was really the original idea was to help guide people to natural health solutions that could be really effective for them. And when, my father had passed away and my son had some health issues, and I'd been through other health incidents, and I, with my family, and I had seen that traditional medicine can be great and it saved my life, but, there's a lot of complementary and alternative approaches out there that so well, Matt, and others do, that there is a lot of science and research on. So the original idea was more research and information-based guide to help connect people to the right, natural health solutions for them in a very kind of easy to understand way versus reading all the research. And as I was kind of thinking about getting that going, as I was kind of recovering, I was also thinking about how mindfulness was such a powerful part of that, spectrum of natural health solutions. And this company, WildDivine, who some of your listeners might have heard of, WildDivine was a pioneer in biofeedback and gaming, and basically helping people learn how to meditate and relax through really cool technology way back, like over a decade ago. And they were just brilliant pioneers, and they kind of ahead of their time, to be honest. Serendipitously, I had heard through a random kind of sequence of events that they had kind of struggled and that their technology was for sale. And so we ended up buying their business and technology, getting all the great assets they had built over time. And it needed a lot of work to make it, get it back to where it was and improve it. So it actually was very probably meant to be. I was thinking of this natural health idea for over a decade. Mindfulness was one piece of it. Then when WildDivine came, and I said, you know what? Mindfulness to me is a way, and meditation is a way to access that true self, that authentic self, to help you really understand what your purpose is and what you're here for. And so even all these other health decisions you have to make in your life, or other decisions you have to make, if you're more mindful and aware, then you're better able to make all these other decisions. So I said, hey, why don't we start with mindfulness at Unyte? And it helped me so much heal and recover. And I truly believe, one other thing I forgot to mention, I truly believe, I didn't tell you, I got off of pharmaceutical drugs after 1 year, and knock on wood, I've been drug-free for a year and a half. And the doctors are perplexed. They're like, how do you have this condition? Everyone's on biologic drugs for life. I'm drug-free. I have great energy. I've done it through a combination of things that I can't necessarily scientifically prove to you right now, but I know it was partially meditation, visualization, partially qigong, partially diet, partially stress reduction, partially a lot of other things too. But I can tell you that the mindfulness meditation piece, and using tools like Unyte and many others that I've used, to give credit to all the tools out there, really helped me quiet down the mind, the busy part of the mind, relax my body, get into that regenerative nervous system state over and over again, and be able to come back to the present and heal. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of visualization meditation techniques that body talk techniques talking to my intestines, talking to every organ in my body, visualizing what I would be able to do in 6 months or a year, and how it would be fully healed. And I personally believe, I cannot prove it scientifically, although the scans showed a lot of improvements. I personally believe that helped heal me a lot. So basically, Unyte, where we are now is this, as you see this ear clip on my ear, we realize that all meditation and mindfulness can be wonderful, and we use all different techniques, and we're big believers in anyone who's helping people learn meditation and mindfulness. It's awesome. We also realize, though, that for people who are struggling a little bit more with either mental health challenges or illness, or people who are frustrated trying to meditate or have a tough time creating a habit out of it, sometimes tools and technologies can be very powerful to help as a training tool or an awareness tool. So really what we have is an awareness tool that takes a biofeedback device called the IM2, clips on your ear, measures your heart rate variability, and can measure some other things in the near future like skin conductance. And it transmits that. This is our kind of Unyte branding box. It transmits that to either a laptop, tablet, or smartphone. And we have a series of journeys or content experiences that I can show in a bit, but that help guide people and play interactive games and experiences to help people learn how to kind of get into a parasympathetic, relaxed nervous system state, and then help them really understand how they can do that consistently. So it's really a training tool, and we give them a very simple score from 1 to 100. 100 is you're in a full kind of parasympathetic Zen monk, Buddhist monk type state. 1 is you're in full fight or flight, and HRV, heart rate variability, is a very clear, direct reflection of your nervous system according to 50 years of research. So we just basically combine the art and the science with biofeedback, and the art with all types of interactive, relaxing, interesting content to help people gain awareness and mindfulness and relax. And it really can help as part of anyone's kind of life, but also we've seen a lot of success with clinics who use it as part of an integrated kind of treatment protocol for anxiety, stress, depression, pain. Obviously this is not a disclaimer, it's not a treatment for those for those conditions, but as part of an integrated program, it can be a very powerful piece of the puzzle. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it was great. Well, I was thinking about a question to ask, and I'm kind of like going to revert because you said a lot of great stuff there. One of the things you just talked about is decreasing stress, and you being more scientific, logical, you're looking for, how do I prove this? For me, the way that I grew up, I didn't give a crap about the proof. I just knew it worked. You know what I mean? I was like, I know that it's working for me. I don't need anything outside, or then alone a person in a white suit to tell me what I know. Right.
Yeah.
But also it's really great if they confirm it. So, you're getting the result, but I think a couple of podcasts ago, people are saying 80 to 90% of disease is caused by stress. And we're stressed out because of our jobs, and we're in survival mode. You know what I mean? We're getting the money so we can survive. And that's what keeps us in perpetual stress, and you're talking about, a little bit more money. And I look at your bio, I was like, CEO of this. I'm like, I'm sure the money situation was totally fine, but we come up with these other ways to keep us going there. So the question that I had was, where you are now, do you think that you could have told previous you, let's say a year before the near death, anything that would have shifted to move you into fully committing to Unyte without the body giving you that response? And the second part of that is I was debating and having a deep conversation with some people about the law of attraction and trying to find reason about, why do we attract into our life the terrible shit? And, I often say enlightenment is taking 100% responsibility for everything that's happened to you, and then being of service to others. But that can be also, that I was really reflecting on that. Is that the best thing? What if this thing just happens? Like, okay, I get hit by a car, I'll take responsibility for that because, I'm not a victim. I gotta be a creator. I gotta create out of that. But was it me thinking about something that got me dinged by the car? Was it past life karma? Was it something that I just needed to learn to guide me in a certain way? But from accepting the experience, then I can grow from it. So yeah, maybe you can just, answer those.
Yeah.
if I formed the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, if I could have gone back in time and talked to my prior self, I mean, I think one big thing I would have said is, hey, this future that you're kind of imagining doesn't really exist. I mean, the present is all that we have, and each moment is all that we have. And um, I think I would have definitely said, living for the future and this way that we're caught up in achievement, it causes a lot of stress, and you can actually never win. I mean, that's why I think we have record levels of wealth in our society and record levels of depression, right? And anxiety and stress. And here's what I learned, because I checked every box you could possibly check on the way up, right? And so here's what I learned. Um, if you're focused on external validation and only achievement and results, including in public companies, whether it's quarterly results or your own personal stuff, I think it's an impossible. I think it's very difficult to find true joy and peace out of that, because here's what happens. You set a target, and of course you need goals and time, but like, you set a target. If you actually hit your target in this world, that world, you're so quickly on to the next target, you don't even stop to celebrate. You're like, okay, what's the next target? And you're so stressed because you just got to the target and you worked your ass off 24/7 together. And you're like, okay, what's the next target? And you're just gone. That was my whole life. Now, if you miss the results, it's even worse, because then you feel terrible that you've missed your results because you're so competitive, and you've attached your whole identity and your sort of success, and who you are, to what you do and those results. So I actually think it's a very tough proposition. Whereas we're trying to build a culture at Unyte, which is more of a service-driven culture. Of course, we say, hey, there's some ranges of targets we'd like to get to over time, but we phrase it in a way where it's much more about our customers and how many people we're helping versus the money. And we also, how happy they are, how satisfied they are. That's very important. And I'm a big fanatic about customer satisfaction and service. And the other thing we do is we really focus on the effort versus the outcome, right? Because if you focus on the effort, and every day waking up and setting the intention, say, we're going to do these things. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do to improve our product, to help people, to service people. Then the outcomes will come, right? So I think I would have definitely told the prior self, two things. One, focus more on the effort and the purpose, and less on the outcomes and on the external validation. And there's never going to be a perfect moment. You just gotta listen and give it a shot. This is what we're here for in life, right? And your second question, can you remind me of your second question?
Yeah, it was kind of like, the finding the meaning or kind of purpose for why does the bad shit happen?
Got
From
it.
your perspective, like, do you feel like it was like, kind of like a law of attraction thing, like a spirit little guide? Like, what would be your perspective of having that challenging experience where you almost die? Some people have terrible things happen,
Yeah.
and then once it happens, the best way to go through it and make use of that challenge. And is it even necessary? What's the purpose of that, experience?
Yeah. Well, that's a big one. I definitely believe we all have a purpose, and we're here on a journey. Now that can go in many different directions, and I think we create a lot of our own reality through our beliefs and thoughts and emotions. And I've tried to change my view, see problems as challenges. And I think part of our evolution, our soul's evolution, whatever you want to call it, is we're meant to go through certain challenges because we're meant to learn, we're meant to experience, we're meant to connect, we're meant to evolve. And so I feel that, if we look at those challenges as part of our journey, and we say, okay, what can we learn from those? What is the message we're trying to be sent? How might we change or more align with, what we're meant to do, and being of service and so on? I think it really reframes it. I mean, if you read John Kabat-Zinn's tome of a book, the original one, Full Catastrophe Living, which is an incredible book that on his MBSR protocol from 1990, he wrote this book. Now it's long, but it's amazing. He talks a lot about how if you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. And he talks a lot about perspective. And if you read one of my favorite books, which is The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, which is an amazing story of their friendship and what really brings joy based on their experience. They've been through a lot of suffering, both of them. Yet the perspective is so important. And how do you keep that perspective, that broader perspective in the context of your day-to-day life? I think that's really important. So I think, listen, I'm sure that there were potential paths, and I think there are a lot of opportunities or a lot of potential paths, probable kind of realities, if you think of quantum physics, laid out in front of you. And based on your choices in life, or maybe your thoughts and your emotions or beliefs, you can choose certain ones. So maybe I'm sure there were probable realities or paths where I didn't have this near-death experience, but the way I was going, I think it was a necessary challenge. In fact, I look at it as a real, I'm very grateful for that, to be honest, because it was an awakening. And I was able to start from scratch and say, okay, if today was the first day of my life, what would I do today? What's important to me? And I mapped out in a very, multidimensional way, who am I? What is my purpose? What are my key principles and priorities in life? And what are my roles, and who am I of service to in my life? And I look at that every morning. I prioritize based on that. The other thing I would have told myself a year before would have been, you actually can be more effective in life, in all your aspects of life, if you actually take time for self-care, whatever you want to call it. I was always thinking, I got to work 24/7. Now I have my first priority is to nourish myself, my soul. I devote time to that every day, every morning, and that is the most important thing, because I need to do that in order to be healthy and peaceful and happy and effective in all my areas, whether it's as a father or a husband or a leader in a business or nonprofit work that I do. So I do not sacrifice that, and that's been one of the biggest changes in my life. It's also, the other thing I'd say is it's much easier when you go through what I've been through, you've been through, to, at least I found, have clarity around what's important and what isn't. So just some examples, and I really try not to judge anymore. I was very judgmental before, although my wife will tell you I still do judge at times. But I really try hard. But I mean, like, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I mean, that's partially from my health condition, that I had. But I just find that the negatives of it outweighed the positives, and things like that. I've removed a lot of things from my life, and material things and attachments that didn't add much value, and that's actually allowed me to raise my energy. And because your energy, according to Joe Dispenza and others, is where you focus your attention and your consciousness, that's where your energy goes. So if you're constantly in the future or the past, or worrying about these things, or doing these things that aren't really helpful to you or aligned with your purpose, you're sending off a lot of energy. And I know you probably know this from your martial arts background too. And I mean, so I've really have focused my energy every day, on the things that are most important.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I totally agree with all those points. And I think they're very important. The main key is understanding what's important for you, and to make that the priority over other things that we may perceive are the most important. Just taking a little bit of time to write them down, right? Like after your near-death experience, you write down what's important to me, what's my purpose, who am I? But we get caught in this thing. We just forget that, and we don't think about that. And that's why I think the shamanic death ritual is one of the most powerful processes that I use for people. And then also the heart journey, which I help the person with, but it just hypnotizes you into your heart to ask those questions, because the mind's basic programming is survival. For us to survive, we need to eat, we need to make food. So if we think about our purpose, it's like, okay, my purpose is to do this, but the mind can't see how you're going to make money. So it's like, I don't know, man, like I prefer to survive. So let's just modify your calling because we need to eat. And that's what the mind does. It wants to keep us alive. So we kind of got to go that step deeper where the heart knows we're infinite. If you're at a near death experience, you're like, okay, let's give this life everything we got. Let's give it a shot here, because, even if you go for it and fail, you're probably going to get a sandwich. Worst case scenario, you'd be on the street with a sign. They're still living, right? It's not ideal. Sure. Ideally, we do better than that, but you're still going to survive, but you give it a really good shot. I
Yeah.
do want to get into the science and more, but I have one more question that you kind of glazed over and I think would be really valuable. You talked about limiting beliefs, and the last podcast that I did with Jeremiah Brown, he's a 4-year Olympian, really Olympic silver medalist. And we kind of spoke about how we'll have an idea and then we sabotage it before we even make the smallest step towards our success. And I think understanding our limiting beliefs and what we're telling ourselves is so valuable. We're so crappy to ourselves, and then we have an idea and we shoot it down. So it sounds like you had a little bit of a process that you catch yourself with that I think would be really valuable, and I'm curious about it too.
Sure. Yeah. So I had a lot of limiting beliefs. I sure still have a bunch. I'd say the cool thing with beliefs, I mean, I've tested this against psychiatrists, psychologists, scientists, spiritualists, and there's kind of even scientifically, psychologically in psychiatry, I mean, they work a lot on people's beliefs, right? And trying to help them change those, and cognitive behavioral therapy and things. So my approach was taken from a series of different therapists I went to who helped me with kind of my PTSD after that near-death experience, and working through some trauma that I had dealt with in early life. And, growing up in a society, I think you pick up a lot of your beliefs, really what you kind of think or feel is important, and how you should be and how you should act, and what's important from your parents and the system that you grow up in, and your society and your community and whatever that might be. So, so for me, a lot of that was tied to achievement and, needing to satisfy other people and doing things, and never letting people see your true emotions or your vulnerable side, and competing and winning and a lot of other things. Not being good enough unless you do certain things. And so a technique I use, and there are some interesting books that helped me with it. I mean, some were mainstream books, some were very kind of spiritual kind of books. Just basically says that your beliefs create your thoughts and your emotions. And so anytime, whether it's during the day or when it's in a meditation, you sort of are having, and this is different, right? If you're practicing pure Vipassana style or pure mindfulness, and you're having thoughts come in and letting them come and go and accepting them, that's cool. I also do a lot of contemplative meditation, or at certain parts of the day you have thoughts or emotions. You're like, why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling down about this? Why does this thought keep coming? And then you make a little note of it. And then whenever you have that quiet time, reflection time, whether it's a journaling or meditation, go back to those. Say, okay, why am I feeling like if I don't work, all day and night on this, I'm not doing my job, not feeling good about myself. And then you go back into, okay, as a child, or, the belief is that my value is attached to how much I do, or, how successful I am, and okay, where did that come from? And then just trying to, I think, shining the flashlight on that, on your whole kind of consciousness, becoming aware of those beliefs is half the journey, I'd say. It's not really a battle, I guess, half the journey. And the other piece, I'd say, is trying in a meditative state, or in whatever you choose to change those beliefs, because you need, I believe you not only need to try to change the thought, but the energy of your body, the emotion, because your body and your mind work together, and it's, you need to change the energy too. So I do a lot of visualization, a lot of trying to change beliefs during meditation into, no, my value is based on who I am, and how I live my purpose, and how I am of service to the world and others. And, I'm already everything I was ever meant to be. And if I do these things, that's awesome. But I know I'm on my journey and I'm living my purpose. So it's a very big change, a shift in thinking, right? And it takes time. And I don't think it's just thinking, it's thinking and feeling. So I just used kind of a systematic technique where anytime I felt, sort of a negative thought or emotion, I would write it down, and I would go through it and try to understand where it came from. Then I would work through them and trying to think of, okay, what's the opposite of that? And then I'd kind of visualize how that would be during a meditation, and try to feel that energy of that positive emotion and belief, and imprint it. There's great books by Rick Hansen, who's one of our guides in our Unyte programs, who wrote Buddha's Brain, around how you can kind of, imprint positive beliefs or thoughts or memories or emotions in place of negative ones. So that's the approach I used. And but I think the key is just awareness, being more aware of whenever you're feeling negative thought or emotion, what is that? Why is that? When your spouse or your child or a friend, is picking up things and making you agitated. Okay, why am I feeling agitated? Is it them or is it really me? Are they mirroring something in me? And is it a judgment or a belief that I have that they should be a certain way, which kind of goes against, acceptance and compassion. So that's how I've tried to do it.
Awesome, man. I think it's simple and really, really valuable, because on the flip side of that is we have a feeling, and even boredom, or doubt or criticism or whatever. And what we do is we distract ourselves through different
Yes.
means. And
Yes.
sometimes it's smoking, sometimes it's eating, sometimes it's social media. Probably for a lot of people, it's social media. And some are more destructive. And what we're
Yeah.
doing is just flipping the lens, having a look and in a dialogue with ourselves to see where it's coming from. This, they'll sometimes call it shadow work, right? It's this uncomfortable feeling. It's not that
Yeah.
it shouldn't exist and it's all fairies and rainbows. It's the ability to look at that and just have a peek at it. Where does this come from? And then that shining the light allows you to transform it and get that information that's needed. And so
Yes.
very simple, very powerful process. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I did just one point. I did have a lot of good support from therapists and coaches, and very helpful. And just one quick point on the whole trauma piece or the avoidance. I mean, I think we've read a lot and talked to a lot of practitioners around trauma and addiction, and there's some great books I've read, like How the Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel, I think Vanderfolk. But we've been actually surprised by how powerful like our interactive meditation is in opioid addiction clinics, and we're doing research with some of them now in the US. And it's not just ours. I mean, other techniques would work too. And when I talked to the psychiatrist and the psychologist, I said, how can the results be so powerful that when you incorporate 30 to 60 minutes a day of meditation and biofeedback, you have such great results and dropout rates and sobriety rates? And they said, well, a lot of, not all, but a lot of addiction and other challenges are tied to trauma, either pain that's, from childhood or other times. And a lot of people who suffer from trauma, to your point, they try to avoid and displace and turn to drugs or alcohol or other things. In addition, they tend to have very high anxiety over that, and fear. And so by training people to see their nervous system on a screen, all of a sudden see this environment where they can breathe and start to become aware, which is a little freaky at first, of their thoughts and feelings and physical sensations, and how their breathing can regulate their nervous system and their heart rate and their stomach, because it's all tied together, right? The nervous system. It's quite powerful. And then the amazing thing is not only do they learn relaxation, self-regulation, but then the therapy and the group therapy and the other elements of these programs is more effective because they're in a more rational frontal lobe state, and they can actually start to get to some of the root cause of the trauma, or, how their limiting beliefs or what might have happened in childhood. So I think back to getting to awareness and mindfulness and this relaxed nervous system state can be very powerful. However people do it, there's so many different techniques to do it in even very serious health, mental health challenges, whereas historically it was just treated with drugs.
Awesome, man. Yeah, those are all really great points. And what it just brings back for me is just getting back into the body. You know,
Yes. Yes.
I've heard before that our body is has, let's say, 100 gigs of memory, right? Or
Yeah.
100 terabytes. And as you go through the day, it's storing all that memory in the body. So if you have a traumatic experience, it might be stored here. And we're not learning how to kind of clear the memory, right? We're
Yeah.
storing it, but we're never looking at that thing again because that thing sucked and we don't want it there. But if we can look at it and learn how to remove it, then we can clear out that data and that experience.
Yes.
And so what's happening, I think, that in our world in general is we're focused on the external goal, the item, the car, the money, the thing. And we're so far from actually in our bodies and
Yes.
turning the lens into what are we doing? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? And those
Yes.
things are so secondary, and it doesn't make any sense. We got to use the science now to train ourselves to come back into the body, which is the technology, and it's got all the answers that we need.
Yeah. No, you're dead on. And that's why I was lucky enough to do a half-day session with Dr. Gabor Mate once. And that guy is one of my idols if you haven't read his stuff. He's like an expert on trauma and addiction. He's Canadian. But that's what he did. He went around the room and everyone feeling anxious, feeling like, hey, where are you feeling that in your body? Oh, it's in my chest. And I said, okay, let's go there. Let's take some time, go inward, and he would just work and work through the body, right? Because so I think you're dead on with that. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Okay, so one, I want to interview that guy, so maybe you can hook
Yeah,
that up.
he's amazing.
Two, now is the time for, you have all the studies, and this is what I'm thinking. So for the people who are like logical, you inherited some of the work, some of the IP. There's so much study on meditation and what it can do. So what are some of the most for you astonishing studies, or ones that really like this is for real? Because the thing, and that's what I'm trying to do with sport, right? It makes no sense to me that they don't teach the mental game. Every great athlete and coach is like, yes, it's all mental. I was like, okay, now go run laps, now go lift weights, now go do this. And it's like, where's the mindfulness coach? Why is that not here? You know what I mean? It's the most important part. So we need that science. So for you, what are some of the most astonishing studies that, prove that this stuff actually works?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we actually were so interested in the research, even though I agree it goes beyond the research. And just because there isn't research on something doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means the research isn't there yet. But so we actually did a couple of things. One, when we bought WildDivine, they had 100 research studies that had somehow involved WildDivine products or mentioned WildDivine over a decade. So we did a whole literature review. We pulled all that together. We worked with a researcher. And we were just blown away by how much research there was. And, a few examples, they had done research using our old products in the Mayo Clinic with ER nurses. And I think, if you think of professions that were stress, and I agree, I mean, stress is one of the biggest drivers of chronic disease. In fact, when the chief wellnesser of the Cleveland Clinic, I heard him speak, and he talked about what has basically caused, chronic disease is responsible for 86% of the costs of the U.S. healthcare system. Of the $3.5 trillion a year, 86% is chronic disease, and 70% of deaths every year are from chronic disease. And when he said they had done a 10-year research study on the Cleveland Clinic patients, it was a lot of the basic lifestyle habits and changes that really made a difference. And the top two, he said, if you could somehow figure out how to reduce your stress, which can be very hard, that has a huge impact on every aspect of life and every potential chronic disease. And if you can walk 5,000 or 10,000 steps a day, that has a huge impact on you in many ways in reversing or preventing chronic disease. There's obviously a lot more you can do, but he was just kind of pick one of those two, create a habit out of it, and then go on to the next one. But yeah, so the research, so these nurses, have very stressful jobs, as do doctors. So it was very interesting to see how this helped them kind of manage their stress when they were obviously, you can't change the fact that they have to work hard and they have stressful situations with their patients, but spending, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day going into a quiet room, just taking a little mindfulness break, breathing, watching these beautiful nature scenes was able to calm them down and reduce their level of stress and increase their resilience. There were a bunch of interesting studies with teenagers and kids with ADHD, anxiety, aggression, both in the US and Europe, whereby, using these types of techniques for, several weeks significantly decreased anxiety and aggression, increased focus, creativity, etc. There were some really interesting studies done, as I mentioned, kind of in the addiction area, which we're just diving more into now. And great places like, Yale's Youth Anxiety Clinic did work on this, and children's hospitals. And so the interesting thing here is, meditation, mindfulness can cut across almost anything, because when you bring that awareness and you allow the body to get into that regenerative state, it can only help. I mean, we were just contacted recently by one of the top cancer institutes in the US to do research on, not that not that, this takes the place necessarily of chemotherapy, but when someone's going through a cancer treatment program, a big part of it is they're really stressed. They're struggling. It's painful. It's challenging. So taking them through a program during and after treatment, which has significant outcomes, and helps them just kind of figure out how to better manage the stress, have more perspective, very powerful, because everyone's going to have stress. I don't believe that it's possible to have a stress-free world, which a lot of people talk about. I think there's going to be stress. There are going to be challenges, as we said before. How we handle those, how we train people to handle those is very important. We're very passionate about helping kids too, which is why, a lot of our games now are not necessarily kids games, but we're looking at now in the next generation. We've had a lot of feedback from youth psychologists and psychiatrists saying, hey, can you create more kid versions of games, not necessarily shooter games, but like fun games that kids can play with biofeedback so that they can actually, use technology for good. And I think you nailed it. Using the science and technology for good. People are already on these devices all day long. They're using technology. It's having some positive effects, a lot of negative effects. And how can we actually bridge the gap, especially with younger people who, are going to be on these devices no matter what? How can we give them a tool where it's using the technology they know, speaking the language they speak, to help them learn some of these skills? Because if we can teach these kids skills early on in life, I think it can have a significant effect on their lives to make them more resilient and to handle issues without maybe going all the way in terms of having a really difficult mental illness or tough situation or suicide, because a lot of that is their perspective at that point in time and their ability to adapt and cope. So we're really passionate about that. I mean, my son is 9. He has a lot of anxiety and some sensory challenges, and constantly trying to figure out ways to help him regulate his nervous system through this device and many other approaches, to try to help him, be in a less reactive state. So so the research I think is important, but to your point, it's also how you feel. That's why we like the art and the science, and we are just starting some other research studies in the areas of anxiety and addiction, a few other areas. So we'll continue to do that, but I think and we also have a meditation research report that we just did as part of our Kickstarter rewards, where we pull together hundreds of studies around meditation's effect on depression, anxiety, stress, sleep, and memory. And I can share a copy of with you and your listeners if you want, but it's pretty powerful how it goes through how the stress effect works on the body and how meditation offsets that. So I think the research is fully there and it's caught up if people need that as validation. And now it's really about how do we help as many people as possible take that first step towards trying some of these techniques out.
Yeah, man. I love all that. Well, yeah, as far as the research goes, the way that I kind of see it is that, if you want strong legs, squats, and
Yeah.
if I'm learning something, I was like, I'll just do the squats and see if it works.
Yep.
And mindfulness and meditation was something that I did through martial arts and just knew that it worked. But, we're trying to get people in the game. The research is there. And I really like, and am grateful that you're doing work with kids, because again, the Zen athlete thing is the kids,
Yeah.
you teach them these things, then they have them forever. It's a perspective, a kid who can clear his mind. So the way that I kind of share it is like, if you're going to do a basketball shot, learn to clear your mind, take 3 deep breaths. Somebody who can clear their mind and can't. It's a fundamental shift in consciousness. 2, visualize the shot going in, that you're the creator, you influence your reality. And the third part is, if you miss the shot, what's the most powerful and positive perspective that you can have in that situation? Your self-worth, and you always get to choose your perspective. So your self-worth isn't on the line. If you fail is just a part of it. It's the experience. And so we learn to have these different lenses. And if we can empower kids with things like this, mindfulness, technology, gamification, those lenses that are more supportive to navigate our existences, right? Right now we have these lenses and perspectives that are culturally, kind of across the board, that aren't supportive, that create competition, fear, survival, right? And we can't function. There's some studies and philosophy or whatever about just being stuck in the survival state, and we can't be trusting in the universe, thriving, joyous, excited, and then worried we're going to die at the exact same time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like the saber-tooth tiger, we don't function as well, and it screws up our body. It's not supposed to stay there. And what's happening is we're getting these little blips throughout the day that just trigger us back into it. So we need to kind of go the other way with it. So I'm really grateful you're going to be working with kids, and I think that the gamification is super important, and that now we are at a time where we can use technology for good. Back only 10 years ago, maybe even more or less or whatever, it's like I was interviewed and they're like, okay, Matt, like you do lots of meditations, like give us the rundown on how do we meditate. And every time I hear that question, I find it hilarious. It's like, sit down and shut up. And I think like this little comic that I saw once, and I think it's just like meditation teacher, and it was like a dog to the person, just go sit. And just that's it. And that was the way, but that was the hard way. You know, that was the harder way. We're not sure if we're doing anything. We're not sure if the squat is working, right? But now through gamification, biofeedback, and technology, number one, it's way more enjoyable. Two, your brain is producing those states and you know it.
Yes.
And three, it's way easier and way more fun. You know, it's,
for
you know,
sure.
you should just sit down. There's no reason you should be in business, but there is a reason you should be in business.
Yeah.
It's like everybody sit down. It's like, you know what? We're going to make it fun, and you know, and everyone can get in, right? And then once they use that, maybe they'll go out and be like, oh, I'm not going to use. It's kind of like training wheels.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
Yeah, it's training. You're dead on. It's training wheels. It's an awareness tool. It's a training tool. If people don't have to use it for life, that's cool. A lot of the clinics we're in, you know, people rotate in every 30 days or 60 days, so that it's fresh for them, and then they can use it at home if they want. But it's habit creation, right? Just like MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, they do that for, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. You know, 8 weeks, 6 times a day, and then it turns into a habit. And so yeah, it's the other thing is, how is it transferable to daily life? You know, because I think that's where I struggled to. I was deep in my meditation practice, then I'd come out of it feeling great, and then my wife or my son would remind me by the end of the day, say, yeah, you're angry, you're aggressive, you're stressed. Like, what happened? I'm like, well, life happened, I guess. And so how you eventually train yourself to be able to come back to the breath, come back to, you know, close your eyes, take a few breaths, go inward, get grounded again, get into that resonant state. We call it resonant state, you know, during the day-to-day, taking mindful breaks. So I think one of the big things is, there's a training tool. Then how do you make that transferable to life when you're out there facing the challenges you're going to face, and keeping that in mind. And we've heard many examples, whether it's our tools or others, where after people train on this for a while, they're in a stressful situation where in the past they would have lost it or been really heightened or had some physical issues. And they remember, you know, okay, I know the breathing technique. I'm going to go back and breathe and close my eyes, imagine that kind of scene. And, you know, every breath, it's a new chance to come back to the present, to be aware. So the great thing is, and the other thing I learned also is not to be too hard on yourself, like to your point. I mean, you can beat yourself up all day, especially if you come from a competitive background. Oh, I'm not doing well, my score is not good. But, you know, it's every breath is a new chance, and each breath you come back to the present, that's awesome. That's a success. So you can start again every breath.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to kind of end on, or not end on, but to finish that quote or sentence, because failure is like a perspective, you know, like failure is part of it. You know, that's why skateboarding, I think Jordan Peterson, somebody told me his book has a chapter, and it's like, don't bug kids while they're skateboarding. And the idea, what I've learned through skateboarding, it's just failure. You know, like they'll see me fall and be like, oh, he fell. I was like, bro, 90% of this crap is failure.
Yeah.
So if we can add these lenses, and if we can incorporate that into the mindfulness world, and make it, you know, really fun and engaging and inviting for people, where the old style was, you know, go just sit down in a quiet room. You know, I kind of was thinking about, you know, and I meditate in many different ways, and I want to use your tool and app because it's both. It's like, I'm have a reason to get involved, and it is interactive, and my brain is doing the thing it's supposed to. And then I was kind of thinking about, like running. There's something called running naked or something, and that's just like no iPhone or whatever. And then now in a few years, it'll be like meditating naked, where you just meditate, and like you don't have any singing bowls or no guided meditation, no VR experience. It's like I'm gonna go raw in this one. I'm just gonna sit there and meditate. But it's beautiful to use technology in that way, because we have science on science on science, but the problem is, how do we just get off our butts and use it?
Yes, and I agree with you 100%. And the naked meditation, I mean, that's what they've been doing for 5,000 years, in the East, right? And it works. And I do a lot of naked meditation, but the reality also is that technology is all over the place. People are using it. There's all types of challenges we're facing in our society for many reasons. And if we can use technology and tools and approaches to help people, give them that first step towards, more awareness or mindfulness, I think can be very powerful. In fact, I have not spoken to the Dalai Lama, although he's one of my idols, but there is a quote he did say over a decade ago when he heard about WildDivine, the precursor to Unyte. He said, "Technology for good. This is the world's first compassion-based game." Because we do get some purists saying to us, "Hey, this isn't pure. This isn't Vipassana." I'm like, that's awesome, and we wish that everyone in the world could just sit there and meditate, on a rock with no shirt on and with in a Zen state. But most people are really suffering and struggling in modern society. Mental illness is off the charts, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. So if we can provide these tools in a way and bridge the gap, I think it can be very helpful. It's not the holy grail. It's one piece of the puzzle. And that's what we're trying to do. Just help one person at a time, starting with ourselves, and then as many people as we can reach, and trying to build a more mindful business, a more mindful world, more mindful technology.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's really great. And, what your story really brings up for me is just like, when I'm talking to people or having these conversations, one of the quotes is that, to change the world, change your world. Yes. And so in the way that you're operating and coming back to, who am I? What is important to me? What do I want to contribute? Right? Those are honest and unique for you. Right. Yes. And so you figure that out, but ultimately, whether your business is $100 billion, you sell 10, right? It's now your creation, and it doesn't need to be big and world changing. And ideally it can be, and you're talking about the effort of getting it out there, and it's like, this is the thing that in my world, right? Each individual's world, I am feeling fulfilled. I am feeling aligned. I am feeling on purpose, and you've changed the world. Yes. And then that example, when you connect to that oddly enough, you come to the thing that supports your community, right? And you do the best you can to offer that to the community, but you're fulfilled at the same time. Yes. And so it's just a beautiful example of that.
I love that. If we could start, I love how these like unify.org and these other groups are doing like these global meditations at times, getting, millions of people to meditate at the same time, to raise energy. But I think if we could start every day, like we do at Unyte, 10-minute meditations every morning, we have sort of, the music bowls and such, but like, if every person could, up to them obviously, but could start every day with even 5 minutes or 10 minutes of quiet time before they get going into the craziness of the world and all the external stimuli and everything they have to do, just to get inward, get clarity to your point around, what's important to me? Why am I here? How do I want to spend my energy and time today? And what's my intention? I think that would go a long way towards, not only helping those people, but then having a better world in many ways. And it's crazy because you think we have 24 hours in a day, and that's a lot of time, a lot of minutes. Just 5 or 10 minutes a day can really make a huge difference. And that's what I try to tell people when they're skeptical. I'm like, just try 5 minutes a day. Even advisors of ours, ex kind of CMOs of big companies, they're like, well, I don't buy this stuff. They come, try 5 minutes. Okay, fine. They try 5 minutes. After a week or two, they're like, wow, this is changing everything. I feel better. I feel my days are kind of more focused, and I kind of have clarity around some of the people I want to spend time with and people I don't, and what I want to do. And, it's a very powerful tool, even just a few minutes a day.
Yeah, exactly. And not to kind of devalue that, just 5 minutes, because you're doing something, you're giving yourself a little space. And I think that
Yeah.
most people, I use this example quite a bit, but we wake up and then the brain turns on and we're out of bed and
Yes.
we're to the coffee machine and we're on
Yeah.
the social media, and then we're rushing to work, and we got the
Yes.
sandwich, or maybe we forgot the apple today because
Yeah.
adding fruits and vegetables. And then you just keep going,
Yeah.
right? And you never give yourself that time to stop. And that's when the
Yes.
body becomes robotic. And that's when you're
Yes.
being used. Now, slave is a tough term for it. We don't want to go that hard, but you're basically being compelled into a space and time that you
Yeah.
don't want to be in.
Yes. It's on
And so
autopilot. Yeah.
it's on autopilot. You're just
Yeah.
running and running and running. And so just give yourself those spaces to
Yes.
reflect. And you
Yes.
can go into your job with appreciation, but now you're going to add some new lenses, because you do create your reality. If you get
Yes.
fired, you're going to find a new job. And give yourself lots of time. Don't, it's not going to change it over a week, but like if you want to upgrade your job or your life, give yourself 5 years of time. Who am I? What do I want to do? Give yourself a lot of time to make that transition. But if you don't think about it, can't happen, not going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
and then you can go into your job and your surroundings with gratitude, and this really focused presence is, yes, like I'm so grateful for all these things that this does. And now I'm going to add more of this because I create my reality, and I'm really defining my values for what I want to experience in life, and put those most important things first, right? And not that secondary thing. So when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about sales, it reminds me of working in cars. It's so funny. They're like, when I was in there, they're just like, okay, you sell, let's say the world record for the cars is like, 10 cars in the month, right? You could sell like 200. They'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, you got 200. Okay, first day of the month, what are you going to do? How are you going to get 201? Is like, do you
Yeah.
realize I broke the record by like 6,000%? They won't even care, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're on this repetitive accumulation cycle. And it's really important to understand that cycle, you cannot find fulfillment. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
in the acquisition of anything external, you're going to find that peace. And that's why I say enlightenment is kind of the two things, where you're taking responsibility for everything that's in your life, just because you can come from a creator role, not that it made sense or that you deserved it or whatever. You just, okay, cool, this happened. How do I create from this? And two, you think about what you can contribute, because if you're thinking about, the competitive is, how do I take from you? Right? How do I take? But if you think about what can I give, and if you could give everything selflessly, actually, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean you go and, you don't interpret it as like emptying your bank account for everybody, but you're giving of your time, you're aware, and like, how do I serve my community? And then that's really going to line up, because nature and the universe is cooperative, right? Some of it's competitive for sure, but I think that as an intelligent species, if we can be cooperative, that's where we're going to be moving, helping a hand up, because it's really just a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But one provides you with fulfillment, and the other one is, you're just going to feel like something's missing the whole time, because if you're taking from people, then somebody's going to be taking from you. But if you give, that's what you're going to find in your reality.
Yes, I agree.
So I didn't ask a question there, but
That's cool. Oh, that was great.
yeah. Man, it's been really a pleasure having you on. I love what you're doing with Unyte. I wish you all of this success in the world. And I'm grateful that you had that experience to bring you over here and get all that influence and intelligence and expertise over to doing something incredible. Before we go, is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask, that you want to bring up, or just closing thoughts if there's nothing there?
No, I'd say very grateful to spend this time with you, Matt, and your listeners and people who follow you. And I'm just happy I'm very grateful to kind of be here every day and to wake up and do what I'm passionate about and try to help people. And, whether you come at it from the spiritual side or the scientific side, for whatever reason, and science is trying to figure this out, the mind and the body want to be present. They want to be mindful. They want to be aware. And when you are aware, you're healthier in general, more peaceful, more joyful. And so I think the more we can spread the word through great people like you and everything we're trying to do and others, the better. I think as you said, people will become more aware. It'll help them in their lives and their families' lives, their communities and their businesses. I think there is a way to kind of have purpose plus profit and, impactful, socially driven businesses that can do well financially to pay the bills and pay people and help them live their lives, but also that can really make an impact. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So really appreciate the opportunity. If people want to learn more about what we're doing, I didn't get to show sort of demos or things because I didn't show, but you can go to unyte.com, unyte.com. Check us out, reach out, give us thoughts, feedback, suggestions. We're all ears. And once again, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. Well, as you were saying that, what I wanted to ask, I'm not going to shut it down, is talk about some of the experiences on the app, because, maybe you can guide some of those things. So for me, doing meditation for a long time, there's all of these different ways that we can do it. And they're all really, really valuable. And really it's applying that intention and focus to make it real within the body. So when I'm teaching an athlete, it's like, this is the trick, we're going to go into a meditative state and we're going to focus on that. Dr. Joe Dispenza has health, right? So if you're sick, you're focusing on being healthy, and it can be very powerful. It could be energy around money. It could be more peace. But when you put yourself into that state and you're focusing on that energy, your body's actually generating that. So if you want to go into some experiences, and we'll say that was a false shutdown and dive back in, feel free to share some of those experiences so people can get an idea.
Well, yeah. So I think what's pretty cool is, so we have this device, the IM2, which, as I said, measures off the ear heart rate variability, and then it transmits that to any device, laptop, tablet, smartphone. Here's just an example of one of our content apps called Relaxing Rhythms 2, and basically we have a series of different apps and experiences. Some are pure guided meditations with famous guides like John Kabat-Zinn and Tara Brach and Rick Hansen to guide you through these wonderful guided meditations while you kind of learn certain breathing techniques and see your resonance score, which is your nervous system state. And then others are pure interactive games and experiences where you may have to fly a hot air balloon over, or open a door, or a snake will come at you and you have to be meditative and try to get the snake to go away. You have to build a bridge to a beautiful land and go across. We also have a VR, virtual reality application that we're just finalizing called 5 Elements, where we go through the 5 elements of the universe. So picture you start off on a boat, there's a storm that hits, you look around, it's very realistic. The waves are crashing, there's rains falling, lightning, and as you get your resonance score to a higher score, the waves calm, the sun comes out, the birds come out, the fish come out, and you navigate to shore and then move on to the next part of being in like a Zen kind of garden and temple. So all types of, what we say is they're very beautiful, relaxing music, nature scenes mostly. They're interesting and challenging, but not overly stressful, because we're not trying to stress people out. We're trying to get them into some sort of slightly challenged state and relaxed state, and then have them work on calming themselves down. So, there's well over 100 different experiences across our content apps. And when you buy Unyte, you basically buy the device and you subscribe to the content. You get one device that works across laptop and mobile and tablet. You get one login to access any of our content, and you get one dashboard where you can track your progress over time, or where a clinician or a doctor can track the patient's progress. So it's one device, one login, all these experiences in one dashboard. It's pretty robust in that way. And we're looking for feedback and ideas for other types of content experiences we can create too, because now that our version 1 is kind of out there, we're excited to listen to people, get feedback, and the world is really wide open in terms of what types of content we can create. Back to your point, what types of experiences, what types of breathing techniques we can use. So we're excited. We're in the early days of our journey here, but lots of exciting things to come.
That's awesome. And where would you, if you could see the company in 10 years and I'm a genie and I can give you any resource and anything that you need, what would you like to see?
Well, I have a pretty big vision for Unyte. So I would say I would love us to be, you know, a company that provides a suite of, call them mind tech solutions. So I think, whether it's hardware, software, research, education, training tools for consumers, professionals, clinicians, schools, universities, hospitals, prisons, where it might be, I'd love to be able to have a suite of solutions that could help different types of people going through different types of challenges along the whole spectrum, from really severe, challenging mental illness to improving your mental health or physical health to performance, because we know a lot of athletes use this sort of stuff as well. So I would say really reaching as many people as possible out there around the world with a suite of mind tech solutions that really can help, that will have helped millions and millions of people raise their awareness, and be more mindful and present and connect with their true selves. That's really the vision, and to help, not to do it for them, to guide them to these tools and techniques so they can, to your point, be empowered to help themselves and heal themselves and live healthier and more joyful lives and fulfilling lives and enlightened lives. That's the broad vision that may take a lifetime or many lifetimes to fulfill.
That's amazing, man. I love that. So I'm going to give you two very easy, small questions before we go.
Yes.
One is, if you could give a belief when you were going through the limiting beliefs, if you could empower all of humanity with one belief that you think would be the most important belief, what would that belief be?
There's so many, but the big one for me and for, I think, humanity would be, your value is not tied to what you do. Your value is tied to who you are, and tied to that you are already everything you're meant to be. So I think if we can take the pressure off ourselves and realize that we are who we are and we have our true selves, it's not about what we do. If we do things to be of service, that's great. But I think that really changes the perspective on what's important in life and takes a lot of the noise away. I think so many people are struggling because they're caught up in the competition. And instead of, as Dr. Dan Siegel, who's also brilliant, said in one of his lectures, we're being taught, if we're two candles, to kind of lean over and blow the other candle out beside us. If we could actually just look at the candle, see their suffering, lean over and light their wick, light them, we would change the world. So I think, value is tied to who you are, how we're of service, how we help people, not what we do. That's Beautiful. A big one.
Yeah, I love that, man. And then the second small question, which you had the near-death experience, you go back. So for you, what is the meaning of life?
Meaning of life. Wow, that's a big one. Well, I would say for me, my meaning, my purpose in life is to use my gifts to help people, connect with their true selves and live their purpose and live happier, healthier lives. I think more broadly, as far as I can tell from the hundreds of books I've read and the experiences I've had in the last couple of years, and it's still early on in my evolution here on this side of the fence, is it's really to fully experience, everything in life, in this kind of three-dimensional universe that we're living in, to learn, to experience, to connect, to love, to have compassion, and to be yourself. That's a lot of the intention. It's just be myself, be yourself, whoever that is.
Amazing, man. Very beautiful answers. I'm so glad we went and we got that edition. It's been a privilege to talk to you, and I love your work, and I'm wishing you all the success. So where can people find you and explore this? Unyte.com?
Yeah, www.unyte.com. You can find us there, and we're happy to talk to anyone.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you. You're doing amazing work, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
You too. Thank you so much. Take care, Matt.
See you, brother.
Bye.